at Bayer?
Great, thanks, Christine. Yep, so Aaron Baker, I head up our media analytics at Bayer Consumer Health, focusing on the North American region. And what falls under my purview is all things media measurement related, which includes, as Christine said, utilizing the right tools so that we can measure our investment, but also fetching and harmonizing all of our media data feeds, bringing them into a central database so that we can democratize reporting internally to all of our activation teams so that they have real-time access to data and make the smartest decisions possible.
I love it, Chief Fetcher. I think that might be your new title.
Yeah, I take much pride in it.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And really, the goal of our time today is to just unpack that a little bit and really share sort of how you guys are leading the way to the extent we can. And I think I'd love to start in this place where most of us get, I don't want to say confused, but we can get tripped up in really, what is the definition of TV for you today?
Yeah, great question. As I sit above all of our media analytics, we touch all different channels and media types, whether that's true digital, e-commerce, retail media, print, radio, and television, of course. So a lot of those definitions can get a little murky when you realize all the touch points that consumers have. But to boil it down, for us, we define TV as one of two video types, whether it's connected TV or OTT, and different from linear. And that distinction for us is because the buying mechanisms are different for each of those TV types, whereas obviously any consumer can see the same content, whether they're a linear TV subscriber or they're an OTT subscriber.
Okay, great. It's similar experience, I would say, across our customers at LiveRamp, just to advance what you're saying there. These worlds are coming together, but yet there's some things that still make them pretty separate, notably the way you actually go out and execute and buy them. So there's some desire to bring it together, but yet kind of the realities of the separations. Okay. And where do you think this is headed? Where do you think it's evolving?
We think that this trend is only going to continue and proliferate further. We've seen a gradual rise in the number of subscribers across all the different OTT subscriptions. We utilize, typical marketplace intelligence like eMarketer or Ad Age to capture that sort of information. And what it's signaling to us is that these video platforms are a critical media tactic for us to be aware of and figure out how to utilize so that we can help our brands maximize their reach.
Okay, yeah, definitely this time of disruption. I always joke that I think in my career I've lived through two of these cycles before. One was just the internet in general and really dealing with web advertising. Then the second was mobile. So I sort of have my own personal forecast that we probably have another sort of 12 to 24 months of a little bit of chaos here, where we're all trying to get our feet under us to figure out how, what's happening with linear, what's happening in CTV and OTT, and really create our new normal. So everyone should just get comfortable with the chaos for a little bit longer. Okay, and then your team specifically in that context of all this change, what is your team trying to achieve? What's the goal?
Yeah, it's a great question too. Our goal is to learn within this space of linear and connected TV, what's the right thing for our brands, right? There's these different facets where you can buy that media differently. And to your point, we've seen this evolution happen in the advertising space for decades now, and it's definitely going to continue. So our group is focused on being comfortable with the fact that things are going to change and we have to learn how to adapt to that change. And therefore, our goals are consistently answering the question, how do we measure these tactics? How do we capture and use the data to make decisions off of? And ultimately make sure that we're aligned with the brands when we have data and we have insight, to make sure that they understand the pros and cons with making decisions on what to do more of and what to do less of.
Great. And you connected it there, I think, in maybe a different circle or a different cycle. We've all drawn the diagrams of of media planning, buying, measurement. And I think the way you just articulated it is the way that we see brands right now grabbing hold of it, which is actually, for now, you almost have to lead with measurement, because it's really pretty unclear what's going to be happening in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. It's unclear what inventory is going to be available. It's unclear exactly what the rates on that inventory are going to be. And so, so this kind of, pivoting maybe where you're starting a little bit and really getting a good grasp on measurement to inform plans or adjust plans. And then the virtuous cycle starts to get a little more comfortable over time. And you talked about the evangelism there of making sure from your centralized group, you're really spreading it out into the hands of your brand stakeholders, your brand partners. That's got to be a huge part of your job from the conversations we've had and the time we've spent together. It's like you might be the wrangler, you might be getting all the data together, you might be driving the insight, but then you have a whole other effort, which is really about getting it in the hands of some of those decision makers.
Yeah, we spent a good amount of last year, 2020, educating all of our marketers to understand the distinctions and differences between these two video neutral types. So I think that, to your point, we've invested in making sure that everyone's up to speed on what this is. So now when we get into the point of decision making, decisions are a little bit easier to digest because you know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, awesome, great. So you just set me up for my next question, which is, how does that data flow into this decision-making process today?
Yeah, I mean, for us, data is at the core of everything that we do. We knew early on that from an omni-channel marketing perspective, ROI was going to be our key decision maker. And not every digital marketing or marketing tactic allows for ROI measurement. So that is certainly the first thing to conquer is, making sure that not only do you have a measurement framework in place, but that actually how to bring that measurement to life. And really, that's one of the things that I think has set Bayer apart, is that we take the time to design a measurement framework before actually investing in the media. We have that opportunity to present, collaborate with our brands to make sure that they know that that question is answered early on. Like most organizations, there's going to be a lot of swirl while you're trying to activate if it's unclear what those KPIs are. So we set that foundation early. We make it clear how we're going to optimize, and we make it clear when we're going to be able to optimize with, meaning what cadence are we going to get that level of grain and insight to inform what our next steps are.
Awesome. I in the spirit of having done this in a few cycles of different media channels, I've used a couple of different mantras. One is if it can't be measured, it can't be managed. So if you can't measure it, how are you ever going to know if you're optimizing it or if it's playing, what role it's playing? And then the other one that you just triggered, that it brought back memories of many years ago in an IAB team meeting, was designed for analyzability. So you are really you're thinking ahead to design media pilots, to design the way you're going to invest, to prepare for the analysis ahead of time. Which really, some of these are old tricks, but you really have to reinvent them every time and be rigorous. It's easy to just put budget into a media channel, honestly, but to really design for measuring it and empowering it, powering the follow-on decisions with data, it takes time and energy. So props to Bayer for making sure you're laying that out.
Yeah, that was certainly part of our infrastructure or knowledge build last year, was obviously educating on what this thing is. But when we got closer to activation, being transparent about what grains are we actually going to see in our reporting. Yeah. What we have found is that brands feel so much more comfortable engaging in media performance dialogue when they understand the levers that can be pulled. Otherwise, they're oftentimes looking at a bar or line chart, asking the ambiguous, what do we do next? So I think that we've conquered that early on with this filling of the knowledge.
That's great. And it leads to this feeling where it's not just a report card. Like, because you're giving them the levers as you said, the different grains of information to know how to improve what they're doing, it really doesn't come across as like a, ABC grade,
Mhm.
more a piece of information that helps everybody do better, which I think is super important to the way you're thinking about it in your culture. Okay, like, what is the biggest challenge about doing this? I kind of alluded to the fact that this can't be easy. What is it? What's the challenge of being a sort of measurement first marketing team?
Yeah, what we believe is the biggest challenge to overcome is to make sure that before everything starts running at 60 miles an hour, you're investing the time and the rigor to scrub and audit the data that you're going to use to ultimately make decisions on. There are so many different issues that can happen, or unexpected problems with data streams that cause them to either break or maybe just not read correctly. So we make sure we have our analysts focus on just scrubbing through this tonnage of data to make sure that it can be cut and sliced at these different grains. And sometimes if we realize it can't, that's still a meaningful insight and learning for us so that we can be transparent with our marketers about what that limitation might be. But yeah, by far and away, I think we've seen that companies have the biggest or the hardest time evolving this approach because they take the data for what it's worth instead of trusting the data, but doing their own investigation to make sure it tells the story that they think it should be telling.
Yeah. Um, Great. I feel like you're just triggering a lot of analogies for me. I'm sorry. I'll stop with the analogies eventually, but this one, I think you really you put on the checklist for everybody. Avoid the garbage in, garbage out problem. So make sure the data going into the analytics is really of good quality to make sure that the learning that comes out is helpful to everybody. All right. So how is measurement really helping your teams make decisions today? Maybe some examples.
Right. Well, so over the last few years at Bear, we've built out a ROI-based measurement practice so that now all of our tactics have an even playing field with how we measure and score each of our investments. And that has absolutely been crucial to making sure that we don't undervalue or overvalue certain channels. Of course, everyone's going to have their perceived understanding of the value each channel plays in the broad scheme of the consumer journey. But ultimately, there's got to be a primary KPI that you use to make that decision. And I think that we've helped create an environment here at Bear where that's very clear and there's confidence that we are measuring at that grain. Historically, we relied on annual marketing mix studies, which most companies do, but we needed a more agile optimization cadence so that we could honor the fact that we have all of these ROIs to use and inform our decisions on where we spend our next dollar. So those have been some gigantic pivots in the last few years that we've made and is really at the core of our decision-making foundation.
Very cool. I liked you alluded to some other media KPIs in there, maybe in the mix. So ROI can be the definitive place to focus, but reach is interesting in that it can be a little bit of a leading indicator to let you know, are you even getting in front of the eyeballs that you need to? And we see brands, particularly maybe holding agencies accountable to an upper funnel metric like an awareness or a reach KPI to help them have a maybe leading indicator. They can kind of steward themselves towards at least a KPI like that. And then that ultimately the expectation is that will lead to sales and maybe you're balancing the optimization of reach and sales. Do you feel some of that happen within your organization or your team?
Oh yeah, for sure. But since our foundation is ROI as our KPI to make decisions from, the way that we've handled other measurements is we're transparent and make it available to the brand marketer so they can see what we see. we would like to believe that ROI is that single most important metric, but that isn't true for every marketer or every company. So
Yep.
my team's goal is to make sure that we can report an accurate ROI and supplement that with these other leading indicator type metrics. And it's a collaborative discussion with the brand on how we move forward. At least they feel good knowing they've got all data points in front of them to make the rightest decision. And that's really what I ask my team to strive to do, is to make sure that the data is available, it's clean, and everyone has access to it. So the decisions we make collectively are clear and everyone can buy in.
I feel like that's the right way to cap off that this discussion. Maybe we'll go to some audience Q&A here in a minute, but I, even just in what you've shared so far, I think it's really, really refreshing to see the confidence and the kind of measurement-led strategy that you shared with us today. So thank you so much for your insights so far. And I've got a couple of more coming towards us from the audience. So first is, specifically, has this measurement framework helped you build confidence in CTV and OTT strategies?
Absolutely. We've built the culture of exhaustive measurement and transparency. And, one of the outcomes of that is sometimes what you measure doesn't perform. And for us, that is totally fine. And we welcome to learn from our failures as much as we learn from our wins. So regardless of what the decision is in terms of what we do next, we've got the data point that tells us whether or not it's the right decision to be investing in that specific tactic. And that has really transformed our organization to help everyone feel comfortable to know we're going to get measurement and we're going to have the opportunity to pivot. We just have to wait and see what the KPI is.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, I've got a couple more coming at me. I love that culture, by the way, of just a test and learn. Like there is, if you create a positive culture where no one thing is, you can't make a mistake. Really, every mistake is informing the next learning. I think it's so much more healthy for this kind of work. Next one is, what would you tell somebody who's just trying to figure out their next steps into cross-screen measurement, right? They've traditionally gone into the upfront, committed a bunch of linear dollars, or they're just really not sure what to do. Anything that you could share?
Yeah, that's another good question. It sort of actually goes back to what we were saying earlier with putting in the time and rigor to scrub and cleanse data. The thing that I would recommend to marketers who are early in this path is sort of twofold. First, make sure you know what data or capabilities your existing platforms or partners have. A lot of times you might find that there's extra or additional insight you didn't know was there because someone had a capability of measuring X, Y, and Z in a net new way. And the other is, when you've got that surround sound view of what can and is being measured, that's really where you can start to open up and dig deep into the pockets of, well, what's not being measured, or asking, the measurement I'm being told we have, do I believe in it? Is it rock solid, right? Making sure that you have to invest the time and the rigor early on to make sure that you're set up for success down the road, because you're going to have measurement and you can stand behind the measurement because you've done all of the rigorous work to make sure that it is as accurate and reliable as possible.
Yep. Okay. Great advice. All right. I think our next question here that I want to go to is, and answer this is, at whatever level you're comfortable with. No pressure in divulging trade secrets. But maybe just, how do you think about some of the media channels that are intended to be more upper funnel? Do you actually think of longer attribution windows? Like, maybe just give us a sense of that versus maybe something that you expect to be more lower funnel, maybe more targeted.
Yeah, I mean, that is the $1 million question. Wondering if achieving awareness goals is going to also help you achieve your bottom line goals. There's no right or perfect answer here. we continue to honor ROI as our KPI, and regardless of the tactic or its role to be accomplished, we hold it accountable for that. But what I mentioned earlier about being transparent with the brands and the marketers is, although you have this ROI measurement, if there are other relevant measurements that you believe are worthy of consideration to look at supplementally with ROI, your job is to make sure that you bring that forward in a clean, concise way and just open up a collaborative dialogue with your clients or your brands and your marketers. Your perspective on the right decision might not be theirs, and they might have other strategic goals that have to be factored. So having all of the measurements in one place, I get it, could be overwhelming because now you've got so many metrics to make a decision off of.
Yeah.
But grounded in data and having buy-in from your whole team on how we want to proceed, that's what makes a good organization. To your point, maybe some of those decisions are the wrong decisions, but we fail and we succeed together. And as long as we're learning along that journey, we will win in the long run.
Yeah, very, very good advice there about balancing these things. Let's see, I've got a couple more questions coming at us. You've spoken a little bit about really knowing your tools. I'm not sure this, and again, this is whatever you're comfortable with. Any advice on tools that you would recommend, or let's see, or what to do in that process to really evaluate the rigor of tools that you might be choosing?
Yeah, that's another good one. Look, the recommendation of what tools to use in this is going to sound ambiguous, but it's so important to making the right choices, is choose the tools that you believe can work based on how they're being sold to you, right? As you're investigating new tools and new platforms, if the way it's being sold to you doesn't smell right, or you're not getting all of the right information, use that as a signal. Make sure that if you have a question and someone can't answer it, that at least you have some fair rationale as to why those questions can't be answered.
Mm-hmm.
We have found that's been some of the most meaningful dialogue we've had with internal and external stakeholders, is to make sure that when we have a list of questions, we need to know that we can answer those questions to get us the rightest understanding of the tool and the capabilities. And if those questions can't be answered, that's usually a signal that the thing that's being sold might not actually be there.
Yeah, so some good diligence in sourcing and evaluating your potential partners. This one is maybe I can take a swag at answering this one too instead of keeping you on the spot. The question is that really, what is happening around building your own MTA, MMM versus using third-party partners? And maybe I can answer it generally, and then Erin, you can answer it more specifically. So I would say from our perspective, where I'm sitting at LiveRamp, we get to see brands trying all sorts of creative solutions here. At LiveRamp, most of you probably know we do a lot of enablement. So we power brands and agencies and partners to do some of their own kind of person-based or household-based analytics, as well as provide some tools that we can do it. We can help you along and do it. And I would say that when we watch brands do it on their own, they're almost always seeking advice from a partner or a consultant of some kind in some form, whether that means data science resources that they hire to really help them build it from the ground up, or going with a third-party partner that's packaged it all up. So I think that there's a spectrum of solutions we see working for brands today, and it really sort of depends on your company culture and your staffing on what's going to work best for you. And then Erin, maybe I'll let you answer from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely aligned with your statement. I forget where I read the quote, and I'm probably going to botch the paraphrase of it a little bit, but it was something to the lines of, it costs more to fail than to spend the time up front to know where you don't know how to proceed. So to your point of reaching out to experts or consultants to guide you along the journey is going to be a whole lot more helpful if you're open to knowing when that's the case and you tap into those expertise rather than trying to build the plane all by yourself when you know you're going to have questions along the journey.
Yep. Great perspective there. Know what you're good at, and know when to seek advice. Another question that I think is, maybe you go first and then I'll go second, which is, how would you ensure that your team members, and then maybe also the evangelism that you're doing with your brands, how are you doing that in this remote world? I don't think you guys are back in the office yet.
No, yeah, we are not. It's a really hard question to answer. Because I'd like to say that we're doing it well, but we don't really have that closed feedback loop quite yet, right? I feel like we're still mindful of the past, pre-pandemic, where we had those face-to-face meetings to know that you'd get that transparent feedback because it was a very easy forum. It doesn't happen that as much anymore. So it requires the people managers to make sure that they're pulling down and pulling up, making sure that they're encouraging that feedback loop, because it's not going to happen on its own since our touch points are more seldom in the remote world. So, from a leader perspective, just making sure that you're asking the right people, asking everyone what their feedback is, and that's how you can get the insight and grow from there.
Something I have seen you do that I don't know that you're taking credit for is to also really engage and share successes. So something that I can speak to, we're doing inside of LiveRamp, which I think is creating, is trying to create this momentum, is really where we have a success, and maybe we've done it with one brand, or inside of customers we see them do it with one brand, and really creating a forum where you can share that, like this one, but maybe internally for your own brands or your own colleagues, where you really put together some of your own internal case studies. I think maybe we didn't need to do that as much pre-COVID because we could have some hallway conversations or hanging out around a water cooler. We would share our stories, but I know we've been much more deliberate about internally raising the successes up and really trying to evangelize. It's writing your own internal case studies or doing your own internal PR that I think really is more valuable now than ever before, because we don't have those informal touch points.
I mean, as basic as it sounds, PowerPoint slide creation has never been more important, because it is your voice. It's the canvas that you have to tell the story, and whether it is a success or a failure, it's an experience that you learn from, and everyone wants to be part of that narrative so that they can learn from that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we've got some more meaty questions here coming in from the audience. They're inspiring some good ones.
Great.
Let's see. Do you think that there's any specific gaps in the marketplace on measurement tools? Like if you could wave your magic wand and you could say, I want someone to create this, you're maybe giving somebody an idea for a startup, what that might be? Like any specific gaps out there that you really wish somebody would fill for you?
Yeah, that's it's a great question, because there are a handful of areas. But I think I'm also from the mindset of the existing measurement we have could be better, right? Yeah. There's always that opportunity, and the beauty of the digital and measurement marketplace is that there are ways to make it better. Sometimes it sounds like it'll make it better, but it won't. I have a great quote on my desk that is, there's always an unachievable better way to do something. So, being mindful of what you want and what your goals are doesn't always match up to what's feasible from a measurement perspective in our world.
Yeah, no, great points. Some of the ones I hear lately, the ones I can empathize with are, I really wish somebody would make media cost data much more easily standardized, digestible, easy to move around this industry. That's one that I wish for. And the other one I think that is definitely something we're focused on is really trying to help better coverage of finding the right way to support walled garden measurements, and whatever that right privacy safe way is that can be compliant with some of the walled gardens. I think that's the other one that's top of mind for me.
Yeah, the 2021 seems like a year where concerns about the walled garden measurement is going to be proliferated even more. When Apple does make the full switch over to enabling users to turn off tracking, and eventually, right, our cookie apocalypse is going to happen at some point.
Yep.
I don't know that many people have the answers to what comes next, but making sure you're informed so you know when the changes are happening is really the best thing you can do to keep yourself prepared.
Yeah, definitely. I know we're trying to make sure everyone's got as much education and information as we can. You mentioned, I had one more here around just like, how long did it take to build this culture inside of Bayer for test, learn, optimize? Did it just like hatch overnight? Can you share with us like how that evolved?
Yeah, it's funny. I wouldn't really put a time frame on it, because obviously every campaign will have a different life cycle from when it starts to when it ends. The way that we really help people get comfortable with it was, when we were talking earlier about the measurement framework, to set that up in advance. When you get to the end of the campaign and you actually have your measurement and you know how it performed, just being able to show those two things next to each other, right? Here was our plan of what we were going to measure. Here's what the measurement was. It gives everyone the feeling of absolute transparency and commitment to using the data, right? We set a course and here's what we learned. And by doing that, your client or your brands or your marketers, they're going to feel like you held true to your word. I said I would measure this, and here's that measurement. And that's the thing that gives them the confidence that the feedback loop exists. But it does take a lot of diligence and focus to never forget how you plan to do something and make sure you thread that all the way through to when you actually did it.
Yeah, consistency, and stewards like you are very helpful in making that happen for sure. I've got one more thought here, which I think we're getting down to the end of our audience questions, which is really maybe I can take a swag at first. Is behavioral changes in consumers. Aaron, you mentioned earlier some e-marketer content, and I think maybe I can just add to that with really, at LiveRamp, we get the opportunity to aggregate across a lot of matches happening across our network. And in one of the quotes that I've liked to use, and this is sort of the consumer shifting behavior from linear to OTT, and balancing that, and who's going all the way and truly cord cutting versus who's just shifting time. One of the stats that I like to share that's across many customers, it's an aggregation of about 15 customers from this last summer, is that if brands aren't doing anything to try to manage the cross-screen kind of reach and frequency, that shift that happened this year is causing this really extreme distribution in their media plans, which is we saw an average of 75% of impressions, and that, just think of that as all video impressions, linear, CTV, OTT. 75% of impressions going to only 30% of households, which are the heaviest linear TV viewing homes, which quite honestly are also the heaviest CTV OTT homes, because they are that heavy entertainment consumer. They actually have subscriptions to everything, so they aren't really cord cutters. They're just everywhere. And so that data point is one that we've really, brand by brand, trying to help them unpack. With oftentimes they're after ROI, but if you really take a good close look, you can uncover some of these distributions that might be actually what is driving your ROI one way or another. So I think that the shifting behavior underneath linear and OTT, it's almost impossible to try to guess what it's doing to your cross-screen reach and frequency unless you actually measure it and see where your impressions are falling.
Yeah, that's the catch at the end, right? Measure it so you know, and that'll put you in a position to make the right decision or the next best decision that you think is there, and have the right inclusive environment. Make sure that everyone can buy in. Doesn't mean everyone has to be on the same page, but get the data, measure it, and get your buy-in so that everyone moves forward and rows in the same direction.
Yeah, fantastic. I see one last question here that is, how do you deal with the overlap of CTV and linear? And I won't put Aaron on the spot to answer it. I can speak more generally about what we see across the industry, which is really we are seeing brands take data and partner with their sell side partners. So partner with maybe MVPDs in cable and addressable that they can go out and get, partner with programmers in creative ways, and really try to make sure that their CTV investments and OTT investments are extending reach, not just overlapping. And LiveRamp helps brands do that for sure. There's lots of different approaches to how you might be able to manage that reach and frequency to get the most for your dollars. Aaron, any final thoughts that you want to share from today and recap as we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact quote, but you touched on it earlier. If you're going to put $1 into marketing, just make sure you can measure it, and you won't go wrong if you're able to measure what you're putting into market, because you'll have a data point to make a decision off of next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for sharing all of your insights and everything that you brought to the table today, your experience, your awesome partnership with your brands to help make it all possible. So thank you. And Gayatri, I think we get to turn it back over to you to keep us
Don't quite go anywhere yet. Your session was fantastic, and I love the quotes that you guys were throwing back and forth to each other. I was scribbling them down madly. Aaron, I thought you might appreciate this one. This is one of my most famous quotes. It's actually from Rahm Emanuel, who's a former chief of staff for President Obama and mayor of Chicago. He had said, I'm curious to know your thoughts. He said, you never want a serious crisis to go to waste. It's an opportunity to do the things that you think you could not do before. And I'm wondering, in that vein, and in this, these times that are so crazy and the shifts in viewership patterns, can you speak to an example maybe for something that, that you mentioned so many new things that you're doing, anything that particularly comes to mind that you feel like you were sort of juiced by the situation, the current environment, that's more willing to try something different this time? Or was this just part and parcel of your strategy and the roadmap you had set out from the beginning?
Since we've built this KPI framework for having ROI against all of our investments, and we've had it for several years now, being able to see the consistency of measurement has given us more confidence to dip our toe into water that we didn't previously want to or think we should. Because at least now we know how high is the water level in the pool we've already swam in. And so now is that we know that and it's predictable, it's less scary to dip the toe in the water to something new that we didn't think we should in the past.
That's great. I love that. Rom would be proud. I can't be the head of political and not include one political. There you go. This was fantastic. And also I love really what you guys had brought out in the conversation. And Aaron, you were talking about creating this culture of confidence at Bayer by having all the data and access to the controls and making sure that you're giving your brand partners that access. I think that's so important. And it must also help to build capabilities in the organization, right? As people get used to working with data, they get used to seeing it, take some of the scariness off of it. You get more familiar. And more willing to ask questions and try and engage with it. That was fantastic. That was awesome. Well, we want to make sure we're letting you go on with the rest of the day, but thank you both so much. This is great content to cover as per usual, we in terms of the schedule for today, you guys have given us sort of the playbook on rewriting TV buying strategies. Our next session is on measuring and activating across all screens and streams. So we're excited for that session. We hope that you can stick around for the day, for the rest of the afternoon. For this next session, we are joined by our colleague, Adam Paul, here at LiveRamp, who's the head of Advanced Television Demand. And we'd like to welcome Marcy Perez, who's the Associate Director of Media and Performance Marketing at Cadillac. Welcome, Marcy and Adam. We're excited to have you join today. Folks are still getting on screen, so we'll get, there's Marcy, wonderful.
Hi there, how are you guys?
Hi, welcome. Thanks so much, Marcy. Thanks so much, Adam.
Yeah.
I will turn things over to you. We're excited to hear your session.
Excellent, thank you. Hi, Marcy, great to see you. How are you?
I'm well, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
So before we jump into it, I think maybe just some quick overview of what your role is and what your purview is over at Cadillac would be super helpful.
Sure, I am the Associate Director of Media and Performance Marketing for Cadillac. So managing the team of brilliant people that work on all of our strategic media planning, all of our website, our CRM, and our audience management.
So a small job you have over there.
Little one, yeah.
And just intro of myself, I lead sales for LiveRamp's buy-side advanced TV products, including Data Plus Math, our measurement and attribution platform. So through the lens of today's session of measurement and activation, I'm particularly interested in speaking with you. I think when I look at what you guys have done, is particularly over the last year, it's clear that you have a truly holistic approach to measurement and activation. You know, we get into many conversations with marketers that are still, you know, I need to go test Hulu, or I need to go test connected TV, and there's not much of a rhyme or reason as to how they're going to interplay with linear or other channels. So I'm super excited to just get into that strategy with you. But the first thing I want to just ask, so every news article you read today is that consumer trends in video consumption are shifting. Everybody's moving away from linear. There was an article in eMarketer that we're going to lose 5 million subscribers last year to paid cable. Quantify that issue for me. How big is it for you? How much time do you spend thinking about it and trying to defend against it?
I think at Cadillac, we've just taken a step back to say, does it matter where they are as long as we know who they are, right? So whether they're time shifting and spending time on linear programming, or if they're spending their time on streaming OTT or what have you, I don't think at Cadillac we really care where you are. It's just, for us, it's really important to know who our audiences are, and then making sure that we have the ability and the technology to find them wherever they might be viewing at the moment. So, in a world where time shift is a part of the conversation, we're just kind of looking at as what is our overall video approach. And it doesn't really matter if it's linear video or if it's digital video or streaming video, but how are we going to reach customers in various platforms, really? I mean, I don't think that you have to be in just one or go all in one space. I think, consumers are moving around, and we want to make sure that we're there where they're moving.
Yeah. And so that leads us, I think, on an interesting maybe trajectory for the conversation. Let's sort of go through the whole kind of process. We'll start with audience. You said,
Yep.
Understanding who your customers are. So obviously we touched a little bit on what they're watching, but in terms of defining an audience strategy, if you look back, Cadillac's been on a really just about a year from now, or a year ago, you guys were in the Oscars, and there was a lot of noise about how you were treating the Oscars differently than you had in the past, and one of them was around your audience strategy. I'd love to get a sense of kind of how you've rethought about your audience strategy.
Yeah, so our CMO, Melissa Grady, who is just a data lover, really started with this vision of building our own custom audiences. And so with the help of our agency partners and some data providers, we've been able to build and structure out high propensity audiences for Cadillac, specific to each of our vehicles, so that we can have really robust communication strategies built around those audiences. And then what we're doing is ensuring that the media partners that we work with, and it is our preference that you're able to work with our data providers so that we can give you these audiences to communicate one-to-one. We've been managing those audiences and expanding them throughout I guess it's now over a year now that we've been activating within these audiences, and really finding that this group of people are really 19 times more likely to have an interest in Cadillac. So we know it's the right people. It's now just making sure that we can give them the right message at the right time to really help impact and influence their future purchase decisions.
And so, when you think about those models and sort of the elements of the model that might pop, I'm going to make the most obvious statement ever. There's a lot of data out there.
Yeah.
And so when you think about sort of your own first party versus third party data, when you think about maybe more like life stage and demographic data versus more behavioral and signal or intent signal data, do you have a point of view, or is it, a mishmash of all of those things?
It's a little bit of everything. So we're working with Merkle, and what we're able to find after these audiences were built is we can understand psychographics and demographics and hobbies and music genres and all sorts of really great information that whether or not we're using all of that to directly target our audience, a lot of times the what we know about the pieces of data that this audience make up are informing the partnerships or the type of content that we'll create that we know will be really relevant to these audiences. So, for example, we know that our high propensity audience, they like award shows, right? So it indexes, way above the standard TV viewing audience for award shows. So things like Oscars then naturally lend themselves very well to our audience. We can make sure that as Oscars as a platform, then what is the right message and what do you say to these people? And we know that a lot of our audience is they're entrepreneurs, they're hardworking, they weren't like handed success, that it was something that they've always had to work for. So all of our creative campaigns then are led on these data points that help create what we're saying in a meaningful way, so that it really hits home when they hear that. They're like, oh, that's a brand that I can identify with. So most everything that we do is either informed by our audience strategy or directly targeted to our audiences where we can. So across, multiple channels, we're always doing our best to, if we can't target one-to-one, that we're at least influencing the what we know about you to help impact that one-to-one communication.
That makes sense. And that's a good segue, I think, into targeting and activation. So so obviously you have sort of core propensity models that you rely on. Do you have different strategies or flavors of your audiences that you activate at different points in the buying journey or different touch points?
Yeah, and I think different products have different objectives. Escalade just launched last year. We had a huge awareness campaign. So the tactics and the partners that we chose and the audience that we targeted for Escalade was very different than what we were doing for our sedans that came out last spring, and kind of more of this sustainment, different storytelling that we needed to do for the sedans. So by having the custom audiences broken out by vehicle line, we really are able to target specific groups with different creative to ensure that no matter where they are in that purchase cycle, we have, exactly what we're trying to say to them at that point. So there's a lot that we're doing with our own data as our current owners and how we target them differently than our future owners and what we want to say to them. So we have the ability to know the difference. And depending on the platform, we're able to serve the appropriate message given the relationship that we know about them.
Got it. And then, we started the conversation where you said you try to be screen agnostic. It's, wherever they're consuming premium content is where you want to hit them. But another lens on that might be looking at sort of more of your traditional awareness channels like linear TV and your tentpole brand platforms like the Academy Awards versus more targeted channels like addressable TV or maybe more targeted connected TV. Can you share your perspective on how, when, why, where you'd be using those different strategies and how you use them in concert with one another?
Yeah, I think, our tentpole properties like an Oscars is more of a broader reaching, kind of an all eyeballs moment where we really use addressable almost as an always on tactic. We have different national plans that we support in addition to regional plays and how those are all leveraging addressable as well. So there may be opportunities where nationally we're supporting a vehicle launch, let's say Escalade, and as a result of just vehicle supply and demand, and we might say, okay, we want these 4 regions to talk about sedans, and then we're going to talk about Escalade. So in total, you have this kind of more holistic approach of the vehicles you're able to support, but to the right audiences that needs to hear them. So we very often tweak regional efforts with our national play to ensure that we're supporting everything, 360.
So I want to say that back. So I want to make sure I heard that right. So so your sort of traditional awareness play, as we think of it, was, linear, but you're saying that you really just use the tentpole events for that more broad scale awareness. And really when you're going, for a vehicle campaign or a national campaign, you're still doing it via addressable because you get to have some sense of regionality or some targeting within the national campaign that addressable affords you.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, so we're still playing in linear space. Obviously, our tent poles are kind of like really good opportunities to kick off a new campaign, to really like start some big initiative. Linear plays a huge part, but we do know that there's very little overlap within our audiences from linear to addressable. So in order to expand the reach of who we're really trying to talk to, it's really important that those two play together. So we, I think, depending on where we are and what our objectives are for the time of year, right? You might have a big launch that's inclusive of everything, but then you always have a little support on the other nameplates in other areas, whether that's digital or addressable. So I think we're using it as a way to, I don't want to say below the line necessarily target people, but it's not necessarily something that is big and on TV and something you're going to see every, 30 seconds or something. So it does afford us the ability to, target and support the other nameplates that we have in a way that is measurable and we can validate the success of the performance.
That's interesting. I mean, it's it's different than, and it's more progressive than I think how people thought of addressable even a few years ago, which was just about targeting a niche audience exclusively. That would just be a little sort of sub bullet on my plan, whereas you're using it, as a much broader play. And that I'm sure in part has to do with just the scale that's available to you now via addressable, right, that was not available to you just
that's correct.
Half or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But that conversation reminds me, I caught wind of during the early days of the pandemic, the We Have Your Back campaign. I think Cadillac and GM generally was one of the first advertisers that I thought I saw out there with a a targeted message to current customers.
Yeah.
About how you're supporting them with loan forgive, different payment options and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about what led to that strategy, and were you truly targeting current car owners, or was that a more of a traditional linear play?
So it was both. At that time, we had previously planned our 2020 to look like a sedan launch in March, and then the pandemic happened, and so we put a little pause on the creative that was ready to go. Quickly pivoted. Our creative team was amazing and flexible, and came up with the "We Have Your Back" campaign, and then it was really about reassuring all of our owners. So obviously, in places where we can target our owners directly, so whether that was digital video or in-market endemic or on our website, we were able to target them and give personalized experiences of what support is available to them, to just reassure them that we really were here to try to help in any way that we could. We also had linear at that time supporting that campaign for all of the other, consumers or owners that we couldn't reach directly in a one-to-one fashion. So, that whole campaign was really an effort of CRM, website, digital OLV, streaming, linear. It was like an all hands on deck, like make sure anybody that's a current owner is aware that we really truly are here. We stopped trying to sell vehicles and that type of language you typically use of, an event sale or we've got a deal for you or the great product for you. And it really was like, just stop for a minute and let's recognize that we need to support our owners and give them the experiences that they expect.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I want to move to sort of measurement, and I want to take a broader view of measurement. But before we get to the broad view, I'm just curious, did you put what kind of metrics did you see from that specific campaign? I was always as an outsider looking in.
Yeah.
I was intrigued both on, did it reach the people that you wanted to reach, but also what was the brand halo impact on that, and making sure. That's why I was asked about did you activate it on linear, because it tells people something about the brand, and I was always curious if it had that halo effect.
So we had the fortunate situation to learn from our friends in China. So we were working with our Cadillac China team as well, just to understand, as their market was kind of coming back to, what are the things that we could learn from. And we looked back in history as well and saw that brands that didn't stop talking at that time actually saw a quicker uptick when things started to turn. So we didn't want to completely stop all of our communication. So it was important to be on. What we were able to do with Addressable is turn on in areas where maybe the quarantining restrictions weren't as tight or stores were open, right? A lot of our dealerships had to close. So at that time, it was like, what dealerships are open? What message are they ready to receive? And Addressable afforded us the opportunity to be very custom in that, to say, certain regions need a different message than others. I think others were open and ready to receive product messaging again, where some were still in a very tight quarantining time. So the net of all of that, I think, as we're looking back, we're seeing that as a brand, we didn't really slow down near as much as we expected from a sales growth volume perspective. We ended the year really strong, up year over year, in fact. So really proud of the way the team was able to keep our foot on the pulse and just keep the communications going. We obviously, throughout the many tactics that we activate on, we're able to see, what are these high propensity audiences doing for us, and are the platforms and the channels that we're using them in and targeting them in, are those performing better than, let's say, a traditional linear? And we were able to validate. So we really kind of started getting into Addressable in 2019 in Q4. We went all in on our first effort with our high propensity audiences. By Q1 then of 2020, when the pandemic happened, we had already had some initial success in understanding the lift that we were seeing by targeting our high propensity audiences in an Addressable platform. So by having our custom audiences, we were able to do a direct sales match on the back end. Looking at that 60 days post campaign end, you're able to then say, okay, well, we held out a control group and this is what we're seeing. So we saw really good success, I think, in general with addressable. I think, we're really confident that even in, from Q2 to Q3, the optimizations that we made to some of our campaigns and the partners that we were working with, we saw even greater lift results towards the back half of the year. So we're continuing to take a look at what that medium is doing for us and making sure that we're maximizing our opportunities moving forward.
That's great. And so just broadening the lens for a moment, when you think about measurement holistically, and maybe we'll break it down.
Sorry.
I have my kid. I hear my kids out the door. My wife trying to keep them quiet, so I guess it's not so easy with the dog. If we break it down into sort of delivery metrics and then more business outcome or sales metrics, maybe we'll start with delivery metrics. And I'd like to think about it, across the whole video strategy. What are the most important KPIs that you look at on a regular basis, and what is the cadence with which you look at them?
So I think, one of the things we're trying to tackle is across all of these video platforms, let's say, how do you maintain the frequency levels at a controlled level? So I think what we're learning with our addressable plan is how much more frequency we can actually reach to the right audience. So we're able to improve our frequency reach to our high propensity audience quite a bit. So as we're finding addressable in particular is probably our most efficient tactic right now from a targeting to the audience perspective. I think, there's other things obviously that we're looking at besides just reach and frequency, and we're looking at engagement and traffic to the site, leads to the dealers. There's always, I think, depending on the tactic, a myriad of KPIs that are obviously going to help us determine what's working to our, to meet our objectives. So I think at a broad view, I think many of them play together, but they obviously have different measurement and KPIs associated.
And you said something so interesting that I don't think, again, historically, people would have said this, that addressable is our most efficient way to get to our most important customers. One of the things I'm just curious about is, especially as you bring in cord cutting and, people just shifting viewership to nonlinear platforms, it used to be that linear, you had waste in it, but it still was a pretty efficient way to get to people. I'm curious what your perspective is on, and I think it's ultimately what you're getting at, is to get to those light TV viewers within your strategic target audience. You've done the analysis, it sounds like, that it actually pays to pay for the premium on the CPM.
Absolutely. I mean, with what we've been able to do basically in addressable is to reach a higher percentage of the people that would truly buy a Cadillac, right? Instead of just hitting this massive audience, but only, 5% of those viewers are actually, willing to buy a Cadillac or even, know what Cadillac is, right? So I think by reducing that waste, it really allows you to reach more of the right people in other spaces. And so it's not that we're not doing linear, but everything that we do in linear is then informed by our audience and the indexes we see by a program, by a network perspective. So we're trying to reduce the amount of waste, right? So we might know, that news does really well for our audience. So by being in more news programming, then we know, there's going to be less waste, but but also we're going to hit those people in other mediums to make sure we're getting them one-to-one. So, I mean, it really has just added to our strategy and really helped us be more efficient and direct in what we're trying to do.
And what has, so love that in terms of just, evening out frequency and extending a little, optimizing frequency towards hard to reach consumers, or your most important consumers. What about on the other side, where you do find, especially in linear, that you're piling on a lot of frequency against people, and there might be, partners that are just inefficient in that way? I think whatever the upfronts might be this year, what we've heard is the name of the game is going to be flexibility, and fluidity is the big buzzword this year. How have you been able to work with your partners, especially those that have a strong OTT or connected TV presence or a strong targeting platform in addition to their linear? Have you been able to work with them to try to balance out frequency or reach even within their own ecosystem, like a linear network, for example?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, a lot of the bigger networks are coming up with their own streaming platforms, right? So I think there's an opportunity there when maybe we're seeing under delivery in linear to say, well, what else can you offer us? How else can we reach the people we're trying to reach within the properties that you have? And I think that's a real opportunity moving forward to just think that way, and to think cross-platform, because a lot of the big networks are kind of moving into those spaces. And so it allows you to not lock yourself into just one medium, and to really have that flexibility to make sure that you're, shifting where you need to shift.
Absolutely. And so then, speaking of shifting to more of the business KPIs, let's think about like mid funnel and really lower funnel in sales. How do you think about, proxy metrics like site engagement, dealer locate, or find a dealer, as probably things that you can get pretty quickly, versus sales metrics, which I think you said were more 60 to 90 days out? What are you decisioning off of? How often are you looking at them? What's your optimization strategy around business outcome?
Yeah, I think, our agency teams are looking at the data probably more frequently than we are, right? They're looking weekly and trying to adjust the buys and make sure that we're really maximizing performance. I think one of the things that we consistently look at, and as we've really leaned heavy into addressable, we are looking at regionally what partners have a higher inventory for our audience. So when we first started out, there were a couple key addressable media partners that we were working with. Those audiences have grown over time. We've seen that, certain providers have a higher percentage of our audience in California versus New York, and New York has the market in other areas. So we're optimizing our partners that we're using to ensure that we have enough scale to our audiences. And we're really making sure that the performance is driven by any of our key actions, whether it's, views or site metrics or, engagement in social or our custom content that we do quite frequently with media partners. But then taking a look and seeing, did it generate leads? What was the foot traffic at a dealer level? How did that foot traffic convert? In addressable, now being able to sales match that. Yes, while it is a lag, I mean, if we can even look at that quarterly to say, what are we seeing and how do we expand on that? So having two different groups of audiences, whether it's our current owners or future owners, how are those performing differently? Are there ways to reach more of those audiences with different ways? Are there ways that we can go deeper in different deciles? So our high propensity audiences were originally based on likelihood to be in market as well. So for different campaigns that aren't necessarily an in market need, how do we get above, like higher up in the funnel and go a little deeper in our deciles to really expand the reach of our audiences? So you might not be in market immediately, but we still should be talking to you from an awareness and mid-funnel consideration perspective. So all of these optimizations, are working with our agency teams. We have a whole audience strategy team at Cara. And then we have an internal member of our team that is really looking at audience and how do you ensure that that experience for owners versus our high propensity customers is different, and giving them personalized experiences from digital when they land on our website. What are they seeing with the data that we have and what we know about them? How can we customize that experience a little more?
Super
and
helpful.
obviously all of that nets different performance and different KPIs. So we're constantly testing, and it's one of these things where we set up a test, and if it's a month long, then we're looking at snapshots of that performance right away so that it can inform what is our next test or what do we want to try next. So it's a pretty constant approach of looking and testing.
And you said at the beginning of the conversation, since Melissa Grady came on board, it's been just a very different lens with which you look at the business through data and things like that. And just based on what you've said in that last few minutes about how you look at audiences and the test and learn philosophy, what has been the impact in terms of how you interact with your agency? Like, is it a whole new model that you've put in place? Like, I'm curious about the change management piece in terms of just how you think differently with your agency and internally a little bit.
Yeah, I think having our agency partners be an integral part of this. I mean, they're an extension of our team. And so really making sure that we are running lockstep on, what I know, they know, and vice versa, right? So we can only expect them to deliver based on, anything that we're able to help communicate to them. So we really have wrapped our arms around them. I think, the modeling team that we have at Cara that's working with our data partners, they come and bring recommendations forward, but it's not necessarily that we're just taking everything that we get. I think the team holistically is very curious. And we're constantly asking questions and constantly probing for, a little bit more information. I think in general, we have a very inquisitive team. And so whether our agency likes that or not, maybe we're a pain, but it's really worked out well. And I think the work that we're doing and the performance that we're seeing, it just speaks volumes to the collaboration that we have with our agency teams.
I would venture to guess that they like a leaned in, collaborative, challenging in a good way, challenging their thinking client is the best kind of client. So, and then what about internally? Have you had to sort of reorient the organization around different KPIs or different strategies that might be just new to how they've looked at the business historically?
Yeah, and I think initially when we, we're trying to prove out these audiences, it was a little bit of like just pray and let's hope that our intuition and the way that we built things is really going to do what we think it can do. Once we started actually seeing results, it was a very easy conversation to have. Our sales ops team that's in charge of incentives and all the vehicle nuances, they are fully on board with our approach. They understand it. We sit with them and explain why we're doing things a little bit differently and the benefits that we're seeing from it. I think our approach is it's also expanding throughout GM as an organization. Our global CMO, Deborah Wall, she was originally our Cadillac CMO when all of this started. So she's very involved in, the work that we're doing, and she's, very supportive and appreciative of that. So I think from an internal organization perspective, everybody's really just trying to do the right thing. They're saying, you have a different way to approach it. How can we leverage that if it's working? And our other brands are adopting some of the very same strategies across the board. So it's been a kind of a real team effort where we're getting the support to try. We're sharing the results when we have them, and just trying to figure out how more of our teams can really adopt and benefit from the strategies in play.
And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit and just tell me to shut up if you don't want to answer it. But so historically, you probably did age, gender, household income targeting. That's typically what car manufacturers did. And now you have these propensity models. Is there any way that you can quantify what that change has been to your business? Like what the results have been in shifting that targeting strategy?
I mean, I can't quantify in
Dollars and
numbers,
cents, I get it.
numbers and dollars, right? Exactly. I can say though that the results we are seeing, we're seeing with statistical significance and continued improvement quarter over quarter. So it is definitely worth our time and effort to continue exploring how to maximize our opportunities in the space. And just really looking forward again to just doing more of the right thing, and how do we expand on it.
Yeah. And then you hit on optimization a little bit, so I don't think, and I want to get to questions shortly. So you talked about some of the optimizations that you make. I think one that so when I think about optimization, there's sort of two ways to think about it. One is optimizing towards reach and frequency optimization, and the other is optimizing towards a business outcome. And obviously they're not mutually exclusive. I'd love to just get your perspective on how you've balanced those two and some of the ways that you've operationalized that.
Yeah, I think that's something that we're really trying to refine, is just that true attribution, right? And how many times is the right amount of time, right, from a frequency perspective to drive the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. So it is a little bit of a balancing act. We do pull back on certain partners when we feel like there's just too much happening. We don't want to annoy our customers at the same time. So one of the challenges we see with OTT and streaming platforms is that depending on the way you make the buy, you could have inventory across multiple platforms. And so a pet peeve of Melissa's is, she's watching Roku and she's watching, I don't know, Bravo on Roku. Did we make a buy with NBC for Bravo and it's on Roku, and then you're seeing 4 commercials run back to back in the same, pod. So it's something I think as an industry, I don't believe that we've cracked the nut on 100%, but I know our Kara teams are working hard on solutions to minimize the impact of having, multiple streaming platforms and devices and ways to watch. And are you watching on a Samsung TV with your Roku, and, the whole thing, it just, right, there's a lot to take in. And so we are putting in play, different ways to strategically approach, like, what partners do you want to play with, because it will minimize then the duplication in the buy. And so there's a way that we're looking at it to help minimize that over frequency, if you will. So we are definitely looking to optimize that way as well.
Yeah, there's a really nerdy TV people game that we like to play, that it's like, how'd that ad get to the TV?
Yes.
When I'm watching Fox on Hulu, on my Samsung TV, and we'll pod placement and things like that. So
and for us, it gets tricky too, because we have a cross-tier alignment strategy. So where we run national campaigns, we advise our regional and local level to run in different places. But depending on how both of our strategies are buying, it's really important that they're all lined up accordingly, because otherwise we play that game. What commercial was it? Was it tagged with an offer? Was it not? What was the offer? And then you can start narrowing down, it was actually part of the, LMA buy or what have you. But it's a little bit of a mystery when you see those instances occur of what were you watching? Did you have this TV or that TV? And understanding where the buy was placed. So we're trying to really, it's one of my personal goals for this year is to get better at that. But we are very aware, and we are taking steps right now already to mitigate the overlap.
Got it. Fantastic. All right, let's go to the fans. All right. Thanks. Somebody's excited to hear about communications plans for Lyric. What's in store?
Oh boy, there's a lot in store for Lyric. As you may have seen with CES, we had a lot of really exciting news coming out for Cadillac and GM as a whole. Lyric being our first EV is going to get a lot of attention this year. I can't necessarily tell you when and where you'll see it first, but I can reassure you that you'll be learning an awful lot about that product, and it's truly amazing.
I'm excited.
Mhm.
We might have touched on this a little bit, but not so, how do you approach emerging media channels and how do they factor into your overall strategy?
So with Escalade launch, actually, we dipped our toe into gaming for the first time. Pretty heavy. We had a Twitch streaming partnership. It ended up doing really well for us. I think as a brand, with Escalade being a halo for the brand, it afforded us a little bit of opportunity that maybe some of our other products wouldn't allow. Escalade is our youngest buying demo, and so we knew that we had an opportunity as the gaming industry is aging up, that it's really an opportunity to get in front of a different audience and really start introducing the brand for yet future products to come. And so we do absolutely test into new platforms and new spaces. Gaming will be one that we continue to play in for a while here, and obviously open to any new ones that are on in development.
Have you been on TikTok?
Well, we talk about TikTok all the time, and it's really. Our global markets are using TikTok more than we do in the US. It's one of those things that we feel like if you're going to be in a space, you need to be in it like forever, right? You're not just going to dip your toe and walk away. And so I think it's deserving of a broader strategy and how we want to be in TikTok and what do we want to really get out of it. And I think, with the, limited KPIs of what you could really say, is it doing for you, or what are, perception wise, what is it doing for brand image and all of that? We're still formulating a formal POV on that one, but we haven't dipped into TikTok quite yet.
But I love your comment that, if we're going to be in it, we're going to be in it. And, and we're going to decide to go, even if we don't make the full investment, we're going to put a meaningful test into it to figure out.
Yeah.
If it's
right. Give it a real try. Don't just half attempt something and then say, oh, it didn't work. So yeah. I think we're still waiting for the right opportunity to really pounce on TikTok. We constantly review ideas of things we could do on TikTok, and we're just trying to make sure it's the right thing for Cadillac as a brand and for our audiences, just to make sure that, we're coming strong with a good presence.
Yep. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
As leaders, you're always developing your abilities. What skills would you like your marketing team to develop this year?
So it's interesting. At a larger initiative, GM is really hoping that we can be the industry leaders and the best marketing team in the world. And as a result, we're doing some kind of self-reflection to say, where do you feel like your weakest point is individually, right? So I can say I could probably benefit from understanding the way that we do analytics and measurement, even more so than what I already understand, right? And then we're finding opportunities and ways to educate the team in a 360 capacity. So if you're, let's say, a digital media person and you don't have production experience, well, let's get you some of that. Just even if it's like a side project or something, just so that you have that exposure, and really making sure that as a marketing team collectively, we have this very diverse background and understanding of all the roles that everyone plays in our marketing organization, and not just the one that you're assigned to on an everyday basis. So as a leader, what I encourage my team is to say, where do you feel the least confident, right? Is it in presenting? Is it, in CRM? Is it web design? Like, where do you want to grow? And then it's my job to find an opportunity for you to ride alongside with, whether it's a job shadow opportunity or an online course you want to take or a conference you want to attend. But it's my job to make sure that you're getting the education that you need to be able to feel confident in the areas that, we all touch at some point. But it really does make the whole marketing team stronger when you have a different appreciation and understanding what the other people on the side of the desk are doing next to you, right? So it really is about diversifying your experience.
Yeah, even within our company, and I think, marketing in general is just so horizontal now that, you have to have, to your point, at least a cursory understanding of the other disciplines to be good at your own job. And so that's a great insight. I just want to make sure I hit the right ones. With addressable TV being household-based rather than user-based, what type of programming exceptions do you put in place to avoid non-buyers from being overexposed to ads, i.e. kids? How do you limit overlap of addressable inventory to counterbalance with national linear buys? So
that's a big question. There's a lot that goes, I think there's a lot that goes into that. From a household level, we are looking at frequency caps and how many times that audience has been reached. It is household level, but I think we're, in programming that isn't necessarily geared towards children. So you wouldn't have potentially those opportunities where a child is seeing that commercial a lot. So I guess the agencies are looking at that, right? They're looking at frequency caps and managing to a household level specifically.
I caught the last few minutes of the previous session, and they asked the magic wand question. Always, everybody loves the magic wand question. If there's sort of one big thing you can solve for this year, or opportunity you can take advantage of, like what's the big thing that you're focused on for the year?
I think as an industry, it's what I spoke to earlier, and just the addressable cross-partner overlap and how you can buy your media differently to ensure that there's as little overlap as possible. Internally, one of my biggest goals is really to help drive more efficiencies across tier and provide guidance to our regional teams in what areas they can benefit from. They're still largely in very traditional tactics. And I think there's an opportunity with some of the learnings that we've gained over the past year in addressable and gaming and in other emerging platforms to really help guide the way that they do their media buying as well, to really complement the work that we're doing at a national level.
And so that's a great point. And I'll just, one more tactical question. What we're seeing obviously is a big move towards consortiums of partners coming together to make it easier to buy what was traditionally regional publishers in a more national manner. Mm-hmm. Have you partnered with those consortiums and have you seen success?
I honestly, I don't know if we have or not. I'd have to actually check with Kara from a partner perspective. So I can get back with you on that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Marcy,
no problem.
This was fantastic. Thank you. I see guys.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This was amazing. Oh my gosh, Marcy, you talked about GM, being on the path to having, the greatest, being the greatest marketing team in the world. You just delivered a masterclass on marketing. I mean, the cross-channel, the test and learn discipline. That was incredible. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And I must say, I love that we heard from Marcy's puppy in the background, and then went right into the KPIs, the cross-screen KPIs.
And even phaser for a second.
Geez, you have no idea. I have 3 boys in the background as well. So my life is constantly like how do you block out that background noise to focus on what you're trying to do?
Oh my gosh. Well, I could use lessons on that as well. Wow. Well, thank you both. Really appreciate it. So folks, today we've had 2 of our sessions, and we are getting ready to go to our next session here today. So we've got 2 left. Our next session is with, we're excited to introduce our next brand marketer. We're joined today by Beth Riley, who's the head of integrated media, partnerships, and social at Northwestern Mutual. This session is going to be moderated by my colleague and friend Ethan Settle, who's our head of customer success for LiveRamp TV and the measurement team. So we're very excited to welcome to the virtual stage both Beth and Ian. We're going to be hearing from you guys today about flexibility and fluidity and what TV partnerships are going to look like in 2021, because this is a very much emerging field and it's changing all the time. So we're excited to learn from this session now.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gayatri. I appreciate the introduction. Really excited to speak with everyone here, and especially to speak with Beth. As Gayatri mentioned, my name is Ethan Settle. I'm the head of customer success for LiveRamp TV measurement, and I've got Beth Riley with me as well.
Hi everyone. I'm super happy to be here. Hi Ethan. It's nice to see you again. I mean, see you. Yes, I know you have a new puppy. So will he be making any appearances?
Oh, she's been sequestered outside of my room. Our prep call, she played a very active presence and was biting at everything within reach. So
I can relate to Marcy though. My 3 kids have a snow day today. So I hope they haven't burned down part of my house while I'm in my office. So.
Oh man. Yeah, we're all dealing with a lot of distractions. It's like the theme of today. Aside from the pre-ascribed theme, which I'm still very excited to talk about, although I could talk about my puppy for weeks, as my team knows. But I think let's get started maybe with a little bit of an example to kick things off. I know during our prep session, we talked a little bit about your work previously at Sprint, and that there was a closed loop study done then. Maybe to start off a little bit of details on that case study, I would love to hear a bit more about how the partnership for the closed loop study came about internally and what were the goals.
Yeah, I suppose I didn't even really fully introduce myself. So I actually, that's okay. I lead media, integrated media partnerships and social marketing at Northwestern Mutual. To Ethan's point that I actually, prior to Northwestern Mutual, I actually had my own consulting business, but part of that was working as an embedded employee at companies. So I actually ran media at Sprint for 2 years, also ran media and global social for Motorola Mobility. And before that, I worked at Kraft, a full-time employee at Kraft and Mondelez, running digital globally for them. So I've just joined Northwestern Mutual 5 months ago now. So, and yes, to your point, we talked about a case study that we ran at Sprint. So that was a cross-screen or closed loop study. As at Sprint, as a challenger brand, we were always looking for innovative opportunities to test and make our media work smarter for us. So in partnership with our agency, Horizon Media, who happens to be my current agency as well, we embarked on a test with data plus math on this closed loop attribution study. I honestly think we were one of the first partners to work on something of this scale. And the goals were really measuring the incremental foot traffic to our stores and incremental site traffic to our site, driven by exposure to both linear TV and digital. I think like I mentioned, as a challenger brand, it was super important for us. We were always the biggest hand raisers. You got something new, you got some, we always wanted to test things and kind of be ahead of the curve just to get smarter. And that's kind of how the study came about and how we started the project.
Yeah, I think to give folks context as well, I coming from the data plus math side was familiar as well with the study and tertiarily involved, but excited to hear more about it and kind of have my memory refreshed a bit. I would love to hear maybe any other details or background on the study, things that you kind of learned.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. It was a long study. You need patience to conduct these types of attribution studies and these closed loop studies. You're not going to see results with a month's worth of data. Or I know that some companies, you have senior management who are asking for optimizations daily, and that just doesn't work. you have to be realistic about it. So we met on a regular basis and did constantly optimize, but it was not a quick fix. It was something you wanted to look at over time, because you run obviously different weights of media during different parts of the year. You wanted to look at consistency. Were there any trends you saw, in GRP levels or in numbers of impressions you were running? So it was, I think that was the biggest learning experience. Like you can't, and having to talk senior leadership down from wanting to optimize on a minute by minute basis.
Yeah, I think I feel that pain acutely. I think, we have a best practice at LiveRamp and Data Plus Math for the measurement work we do. You can start seeing statistically significant data at 2-3 months, maybe even less. But like really, like given all of the sort of factors at play and the way in which this data comes together, like you really need to be waiting 6 months or so at least for actioning. Is that kind of in line with the cadence you see from your measurement solutions?
Yeah, I think this was easily a 7 to 9 month undertaking by the time we got to like finished results. We did make some changes in over the time of the study, but it was probably a 7 to 9 month project. I mean, is that I think you said like 6 months is what you typically would see?
Yeah, 6 months is, I think, the norm to really start like digging in and starting to take insights and apply them in a really kind of pointed and targeted fashion. Like I think with all of the clients we've worked with on measurement, it's felt very similar to the pressures like you described at Sprint, where you've got somebody who just floated a big check or a big budget item for a huge study, and 2 weeks in, they're like, all right, are we changing our plan now? Are we optimizing? What are we getting? It's understanding that there are pieces and things you can start to learn and apply early. But at the end of the day, your media, you're not optimizing most media on a day-to-day or even a week-to-week basis. So it's important to understand the broader trend of, you put a plan in flight, you need to understand the pieces that are hitting at different times and create a more holistic learning and approach based on a longer period of time.
Yeah,
that's sort of the best practice, I think.
I think too, we were kind of learning with Data Plus Math as we went along too, having to deal with the walled gardens of Google and Facebook, where a large part of our spend was, and working with Data Plus Math to bring those data points in as well. The linear TV side and even the online video was not as that was pretty easy to bring in, but it was pulling in those other things where they're traditionally walled gardens and sorting out how to get that incorporated into the study. So it was kind of I think it was learning from both sides.
Yeah, certainly. I think we're, from the speaking as the measurer, like you're always looking for whatever little cracks in the wall you can see to peek and pull whatever information and insights. On that kind of note though, like what sort of insights and results did you see, maybe holistic or high level?
Well, obviously I can't share the exact results, but I will tell you, we did see incremental store visits that were aligned directionally with media weight. Also saw some interesting store traffic increases based on day of week. When we ran things, that was slightly different from when we would have originally, typically had thought that store traffic would have increased. So that was super interesting, I think, in figuring out where our weighting made more sense, what days of the week, how many GRPs.
Yeah, no, I think I've always found it kind of interesting. The day of week insight is somewhat always counterintuitive in that, you think about driving folks to a store, they're already more predisposed to go on a weekend. Maybe the media you're serving on a weekend, it's not doing as much to get people who wouldn't have gone otherwise. Whereas that midweek visit, anyways, a tidbit there. I think in general too, like some of the other learnings are in line with a lot of the measurement studies we're running now, right? And generally follows, I think, the basic logic of, the more you spend on a given platform or a given time, like generally the more down funnel conversion activity you'll see that can be attributed back to that specific element. I think one thing we've really coached, the brands we work with, is to really start figuring out things like, optimal frequencies, right? Like, sure, if you keep spending, you're going to keep seeing an effect. I can keep putting more and more ads in a given performing network or platform. But like, how do you like figure out at what point that rate of return really starts to level off, right? How can you identify places where you're still gaining efficiency and where you maybe have already hit saturation, and learning how to balance those two things and really, get to the best possible impact?
I think that was the interesting part of working on this, was that the data we garnered from the study help inform things like frequency. And that's why where the optimization comes into play during the 7 to 9 months, is figuring out what is that optimal frequency. When do you hit that rate of diminishing returns? I mentioned before, we also got the, GRP weighting from it, day parts, even down to the specific programming and the sports we bought in, because you would see traffic increase depending on, what day parts you were in or what sports you were buying in. And then mirroring that with who we had identified as our target audience when we did the buys too. I think it was pretty eye-opening when you start looking at all of those things together.
Yeah, the amount of data you can pull in, you start getting a whole bunch of stuff you haven't seen before. And I think it's really great to see such a buy-in to leverage those results to really inform and change your media optimizations and planning. I think we'll talk a little bit later, about how your experience has played with measurement and how that's applied to specific media partners. But I'm also really curious, because I think we see a bunch of different things at Data Plus Math and LiveRamp around internal buy-in and internal kind of, stakeholders. Like, how did you get buy-in across the org, across media buyers, planners, executives, your agency, like really to ensure that the measurement results were going to be carried into action?
Yeah, I think this was, this was something where there was support from all levels on this particular study, from the CMO on. I think when you mentioned the agency, actually the agency came to us with the opportunity, right? So that wasn't easy. It was a lot of work for them to do too, right? Think of all the data they had to ingest and figuring out, help us within our own organization where to get the data. So that was an easy thing because the agency came to us with the opportunity. So I have to applaud them for that. And then we sold it, all the way up and down the line internally, because who doesn't want solid attribution study, right? Who doesn't want to know if their media is working for them to drive sales or foot traffic, which you would hope then equates to sales. So it was, I think you have to have support through the entire organization. The CMO, if he's bought in or if they're bought in, they can help, with the leads of the data organization, the insights organization, because you need participation from all of those players, right? It's not just a media thing. It's cross matrixed participation. And so you need some senior leadership to help sell it in.
Yeah, no, I total agreement again. I feel like we've done a lot of these measurement studies as LiveRamp and Data Plus Math. And I think, we've done some where the buy-in is really only coming from one side of the house. Like it feels like in some cases, maybe it's just analytics driving measurement forward, right? There's some really intellectually curious and stimulated people there who want to dig into results. They want to theorize about causes and how to make the greatest impact. But when it comes time to action, right, they'll be taking it to the folks on the media side or potentially even the media agency who maybe haven't been involved, haven't bought in initially, and there's questions about validity, or there's hesitation about, well, I don't really understand how we can trust that this will take action. This is not the way media is bought. It's probably older thinking to some extent. We see that less now. But I think at the other side of the coin, we see instances where, maybe the agency or really just the media or the marketing team alone is trying to bring measurement to the table without buy-in from analytics. We often find that those teams that have brought it forward are often just spending a ton of time just defending the budget and the decisions, whether it be for the analytics or for the potential changes. Really, the best results are exactly what you talked about, right? Making sure that it's been sold in across the org, everybody coming together and saying, we know we need to measure what our media is doing, and we know that we need to take results and make tangible changes based on those results. and what's more, like continue to do that. It's not just you measure once, you set it, you forget it, you leave it alone. It's rinsing and repeating and creating like a good virtuous cycle, across agency and brand and media and analytics, where I think we see folks really getting great results.
Yeah. And I think, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like smooth sailing the whole time. We had a lot of healthy debate internally because, at Sprint too, you're working with someone who runs acquisition marketing, you're working with someone who runs base marketing, you're working with the data team, you're working with the insights team, the analytics team, so there was a lot of healthy debate every time we presented any sort of results, because it wasn't like we waited 7 months and then presented results. It was like, as we were going along, here were the things we were finding. This is where we needed to iterate and change things. There was a lot of healthy debate internally. So you have to, you had to gain alignment as you went along the process, and ask for everyone's help as we were iterating and optimizing too. So it wasn't like, oh, hey, the CMO's aligned and it's all good.
Hooray.
It was a process. But I think that made for a better study for us too.
Yeah, I think healthy debate and like everyone bringing their A game, I think is a really like good thing to have. Like you mentioned one other interesting thing too, which brought something to mind, right? You have different folks who have their marketing have like different goals. Right? You might have a brand marketing and an acquisition marketing person like coming together, and you're telling the brand marketing people, "Ooh, your media is not doing a great job at driving store traffic." Well, maybe my media's job is not necessarily to drive store traffic.
Right. Yeah. So, you do have to think about that because, think about it. The acquisition team is literally that they're to drive acquisitions. The base team, their or brand, whatever you want to call them, is literally to keep customers we already have. So it's, but you need input from both of them because you're going to use data from both teams. Like, do you want to build lookalikes based on our base customers, right? To drive acquisition. So you can't tell them the media is not working, their media is not working to drive acquisition, because that is not what it's intended to do. But what we do need from them is data, so we can build lookalikes, people who are loyal to us and have already switched to our service, so there's still has to be a lot of cooperation.
Yeah, I love it. The data begets more data. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
I'm curious, maybe switching gears a little bit now from Sprint to like your current work at Northwestern Mutual. Like, how has this sort of been applied or impacted your work there?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned I've only been here about 5 months. And as we look to evolve our media strategy, linear TV is still a very important part of our strategy. Not to say we haven't evolved to to streaming and to some of the other OTT platforms, but employing a closed loop or cross-screen study can help us be smarter overall about moving our business forward, and that's key, right? I don't know. I think we talked about this when we had our prep call. Northwestern Mutual is a 163-year-old company, and people probably have heard of it, but the marketing department as it exists today is truly only about 4 years old. They really changed and their view of marketing from being in complete service to the financial advisors and doing stuff that would appease them to driving brand marketing and awareness for the company. So as we're looking at how to best drive awareness, these kinds of studies will be key to us, and flexibility, even in what we run. So like, is linear TV the best way for us to drive our brand awareness? Is our digital working hard for us? If TV is working, how do we run it? Do we keep running? And we've had very large scale sports sponsorships in the past with things like the Rose Bowl, which we've exited. This was our last year was our last year in it. But like, how do we run it? What networks do we run on? Are there different sports that make sense? So combining that with digital is important because, as we know, for our brand, search and social are very effective for us and very efficient for driving leads to our financial advisors. So what's the effect search and social has when combined with TV on driving leads? Are we hitting people across those channels? How is that affecting total frequency? I think, what I did, that study we did at Sprint will be very applicable once we employ something like that at Northwestern Mutual.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think I've certainly noticed, and I think it's great to hear that it's a kind of ethos you've instilled at Northwestern, that more and more brands are thinking about like total frequency. You know, it's not just seeing reach as a siloed platform specific measurement or metric. It's really like, you know, across channels, right? You're still hitting somebody there. They're going to see it somewhere. For them, for the user, it might not matter as much. Like, how long has this been your norm? Like, have you had to make changes to this as reality?
I mean, you know, since I've come in, we've made a lot of changes in just the way we plan the media. I think in the last year with the current environment, there have been a lot of quick pivots in general. Not just at Northwestern Mutual, but I mean, everywhere, but we've had to pivot a lot. Media NCAA is canceled. So, you know, our March Madness is canceled. So we have to figure out what we're pivoting to. So I think, you know, it has affected us a bit. I think as we look, I just had a discussion earlier today with our agent with Horizon about like, how do we look at measurement moving forward? How are we going to be looking at it now that we're moving into more environments in the media landscape? Like, what does this look like? Do we employ some sort of cross-screen closed loop study like we had in the past? So, I mean, this is a conversation we literally have on a daily basis.
That makes someone in the closed loop cross screen measurement field very excited, because I know, like, as few as feels like 18 or 24 months ago, like we would work with brands or agencies where it felt like there really wasn't a cross screen ethos. Like, you'd have TV sitting separate from OTT, sitting separate from online video, from programmatic display, and everything was being planned and measured generally separately. But, and I heard one of the other speakers actually talk about this, like at the end of the last session, like from a consumer standpoint, like I am sitting at home on my couch, I'm on my Roku smart TV, I'm watching Bravo on Sling, and during one ad break, I can see like ads purchased 3 or even 4 different ways and by 4 different teams. But to me, like it's the same experience happening right now on my TV. Not to mention that maybe I've got my phone open, I'm watching an ad on TV, I see something that really interests me. The other night it was a dog walking service. I'm opening up my phone, I'm searching for it, I'm clicking through a search URL, I get on the site. And then the next day when I'm in front of my laptop and the dog's chewing at my feet while I'm on a call preparing for a session, and I'm frantically now going back, hitting the display ad that's been following me everywhere to go book a dog walking service, like all of these things have interacted, and the combination, the sequence, and the measurement across all those things to the actual conversion event are really important for brands to understand and really nail. And I think when those media and buying and analytics groups are sitting together, or at least aligned on like measurement and the need for cross-screen measurement, everything goes further.
I'm laughing because I think about, especially in the last year where everyone's now at home, right? I sit in my office every day and I have my phone usually tilted next to me streaming some news thing or whatever. Meanwhile, I'm on a Zoom or searching for something, or I mean, so it is. And I honestly, at Northwestern Mutual, we're sort of, I mentioned this, but in sort of transformation mode with media, right? So they've been doing the same thing for a long time. We've been doing the same thing for a long time. And like I mentioned, we're focused on these huge sponsorships in the past, but now we're able to start thinking about that. Like, how are people adapting to being at home? And, you're on a Zoom and you're searching for a dog walker, or I'm streaming the news off Twitter next to me while searching for something else, or getting served an ad on Facebook, or in my Gmail. So that is all something I think everyone as marketers needs to think about. I do think that total frequency is going to play a role in how we look at media moving forward. And our media is it's planned holistically. So it should be something we don't plan inside. It's not like we plan OLV here and we plan linear TV here and then we plan Facebook over here. It's all planned together. And I think that's part of why my role, I actually oversee social. So not just the paid social, but anything we do in the social space, influencers, everything, because it directly interacts with the media all the time. So
yeah, and it all exists on the same platform in some respects for the consumer.
Yeah.
Maybe switching gears a little bit from like talking about media buyers, maybe switching a little bit to partners, right? And then the folks you're actually managing in that respect. Like how are media partners reacting and adapting or working with you on closed loop measurement?
Yeah, I feel like, some broadcast partners are slightly more flexible and have been ahead of the game. Some have been kind of late to the game as far as cross-screen flexibility or cross-screen or closed loop measurement. Many have their own solutions in place within their platforms. I think, like, I look at NBC and they've done for years, have done a great job. And now with their one platform offering, I mean, you see they're really trying to, and a lot of the partnerships, I think yesterday was just announced that they signed a stronger, bigger partnership with Twitter. I mean, they've really done a good job. And they have an amazing in-house measurement team that we've worked with, like I worked with at Sprint in the past on doing, but it was within their platform. I've always struggled with the fact that like these media companies build solutions for their inside their company, but then it doesn't translate to what you're doing on another network, which is why we did the data plus math study, right? But I have to say, like, they have done a good job of creating this sort of one platform solution that at least within their environment, you can measure, there's flexibility across the platform, even with some of their outside partnerships like a Twitter or a Snap.
Yeah, no, I think speaking personally, I've certainly seen like a heightened willingness and eagerness and investment, even to your point, in like broadcast partners like coming to the table to get creative with measurement and flexibility within their total platform. There are always some slower movers or few spare holdouts, but I think we've seen so many media partners like eagerly work with brands to like take results from closed loop measurement or to your point, bringing up their own internal measurement tools to really impact media mixes at the end of the day to try and benefit, the end result of media. I mean, is that kind of in line, I'd say, continuing on that thread with how you're approaching partnerships with media partners, cross-screen consumption coming into the mix, given the changing effects of those sprawling platforms like NBC's? Yeah,
I mean, I feel like fragmentation and this sort of changing consumption habits they're going to continue, right? And we need to be smarter about it, right? As new generations come into the media world. I was just talking to somebody. I also teach a class at Loyola University on media planning, and every semester I ask at the beginning of the semester how they were exposed to brands that they like. And not one person has said linear television. It's all through social. It's through, TikTok, Snap, whatever. So it's interesting. So I think that's going to continue, right? So we do seek partners that have a lot to offer across their own properties, right? So they have video, they have digital, they have social. I mentioned the NBC thing, but we partner a lot with Disney. So it's not just what we can do on ESPN or ABC, but what we can do across ESPN, Hulu, if they have programming on Good Morning America. We know that our audience is interacting with their properties throughout the consumer journey. So it's about advertising the right message in the right environment at the right time. And how can we be flexible across their, if it's an ABC or an NBC, how are we flexible in places where we can create custom content? So we've done work with NBC. We've done brand partnerships with like the Courageous Content Studios with Warner. I can't get off of Turner.
Old habits, then.
Old habits, right? We see an opportunity there to leverage multiple assets. So you're creating content, but it's run on their digital platforms. We can then run it on our digital platforms. They might even put it on linear TV. It's as we shift more into that space, where we're just allowed more targeting, we have the content and then we can target it appropriately. So I hope that answered your question. Like, how do we? Yeah. No, I think we just look for partners that can offer us more across. And I'm not looking for just one channel. It's omni-channel, right?
Yeah. No, and I think that's like what's been so for me fascinating to watch is like these media partners have built up, massive cross-channel and cross-screen property sets. Like, we talked about our own media consumption habits, like watching all these things at once. Like, it's really great to see, partners collaborating with brands like to make the most of that. I think it's, there's sometimes I can almost forget I could be watching, 3 Warner Media or 4, ABC Disney things at the same time. And I don't necessarily always click in immediately that, yes, I am seeing the exact same, potential ad salesperson hitting me in all these categories, but it's really great and fascinating to see that they're.
Well, and I think, we look at it as a partnership and collaboration versus one-sided. Like, I don't wait for them to come to me and say like, oh, we have this, this, and this. It's like, hey, we're looking at doing this. What do you have to offer us that we can do across your platform? Which is why, like, when I mentioned the NBC thing, right? It's like they've done that in smart relationships, and even like I've worked with CBS and Snapchat in the past, right? So it's like they're all like developing partnerships with outside companies that I think can just help advertisers as they look to reach different consumers, or even the same consumer they're trying to reach you, Ethan, and while you're on a Zoom and you're looking for a dog walker, and so.
Yeah, no, they're doing a good job. I've got a few questions from folks, and actually the one that feeds directly into this, like, what do you consider success, like when it comes to these sort of media partnerships?
I think, basically what I just was talking about is this true collaboration and finding something that really works for us as a company where we're both working towards the same goal. So knowing that our brand is looking to generate leads, and in doing that, we want to tell our client stories with our financial advisors. I'll give an example. We just did a integration on Good Morning America with ABC. And we went to them and said, you know what, our biggest time of year is New Year's. People are trying to get not only their physical fitness, but their fiscal fitness in order, right? Mm-hmm. How can we do it? We want to portray one of our financial advisors and, giving tips on how to, in this economy and environment, how to stay ahead of the game. And that worked really well for us. And it played out across Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, as well as the linear TV. So it was more of a partnership. I think we're looking, that to me is success, is how does a partnership come together, and how do you do it across screens?
Yeah, how does measurement fit in there? Talking as the measurement person, I'm always curious to plug that piece.
Yeah, for us, success is obviously looking at the leads. Did we see increased volume in leads? I think, as we go back and look at awareness numbers, did that help with our awareness? I think it was a very successful program for us, looking back.
That's great. Yeah. It's always interesting to see, I think, as we've started to try to pull in threads of measurement from some of these deeper media integrations. It's fascinating to watch these things interplay and really kind of combine and make an impact. Like you'll have your activation event and you have all of these kind of sponsorships or kind of actual ad buys tied to it. And really, it's interesting to see how like the rising tide of those things together really does, at least from a measurement perspective, what we've seen, like lift all ships. The spots around there and the spots on that network tend to continue to improve.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. So like, as you look at some of the partners we work with, especially nowadays, like I look at Warner, right? So AT&T and Xandr are part of their fold. And the sheer amounts of data that they have at their fingertips, can only help an advertiser as they're looking at measurement, or more precisely target their consumers. So it's a matter of like, what data can you give to them, and to really identify your target, and then working with them to partner to come up with amazing content.
Yeah, and talk about just the wealth of data there from all the different platforms they touch.
Yeah.
Another question, and this one kind of rooted like very much in the theme of today's session. How does fluidity and the ability to deliver impressions across screen impact your upfront deals, or maybe your deals in general?
It obviously, with the right partners, fluidity creates a huge opportunity to extend reach. I mentioned the NBC One not that this is an ad for NBC, but I feel like they've done a great job with their one platform product, right? It is a huge factor in upfront conversations in terms of understanding each media group's linear capacity versus their digital and OTT capacity. the conversation has kind of shifted recently to networks looking to limit linear spend and push volume towards digital, based on where growing supply exists. I think that's true and I mentioned it with my Loyola students, right? So I remember, I don't know where I was in a presentation where they were talking about how a show was not successful on linear TV, but when it was put on Netflix or on another platform, it took off because it was probably geared towards a younger audience who wasn't seeing it on linear television. So I think, more networks are pushing for that in the delivery of impressions. And I think as advertisers, we need to ensure we're not sacrificing effectiveness and we're getting that flexibility. So it does play a big role in upfront discussions. And how can we reallocate if we see the environment shifting?
Yeah, and it's so clear as well, I think, to see like network partners focus really, really heavily on ensuring the ability to provide fluidity, right? From platform acquisition, everything from from Tubi through to Pluto, through to all these like other kind of streaming pieces getting added to somebody's tool chest, and that on top of folks continuing just to stream more things alinearly.
I think, I've seen more deals come through or proposals come through in the last, 6 to 9 months that really have sort of that match spend component to them. Where it's okay, here's the linear, but then we have this much in digital, and it's if you need to move back and forth, you can. I've seen us move liability from linear to digital and OTT in the last 6 months. So I think it does really play a big role in any discussion we're having with partners these days.
Yeah, it's one of the big things we're always looking at in a measurement perspective now is where are you getting incremental reach on your nonlinear platforms, right? If you're going and running on across NBC platforms, are you getting different folks, incremental folks on your NBCU linear portions and your NBCU nonlinear? It's interesting to see as you almost see it in the numbers as the consuming habits start to shift. We're seeing more and more incremental reach driven by some of these nonlinear places.
But then we go back to our optimal frequency discussion too, because are they the same people? Are you driving up frequency or are you extending reach? So, I mean, those are all things that need to be considered as you're buying in those one platforms too.
Yeah. I know we don't really have too much time left. I've heard, Adam before me kind of end with a kind of parting. If you could wave a magic wand, what you'd like to see. I know it's not a lot of time to answer it. I'm happy to share my tidbit if you need a little time to think about it. But sure, share yours. I have some thoughts. Yeah, I think my magic wand as a measurement person, as a data person, is more data. I would love more windows into the walled gardens. I think it's going to be a pretty big wand for that, but I will keep wishing on that star until I get that access to data.
I'm going to join you on that star.
Okay.
Actually, when Marcy answered it before, I was like, I know this is coming to me when we get to the end of mine. I actually wrote down data and being having more control over our first party data and being smarter about how we use it. So I'm sure I've said this 3 times now. We're a very old company, right? 163 years old. So think about it. Our clients are clients for life usually, right? We do their financial plans, they own life insurance with us. A lot of our records are started as paper records. So it's now getting that data and how do we harness it? So that for me would be the magic wand. Like, how do I harness that data that we have to build lookalike audiences? Who's become a client and why and when and what are they like? So.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe I'll talk to my LiveRamp pals about, paper file data ingestion. I'm sure we'll get there someday. Yeah.
I love it. Beth, your brief at Northwestern, it sounds really fascinating. It's almost like you mentioned it's a 160-year-old plus brand and the marketing department's only about 4 years old. So it's really like you have an opportunity to kind of restart that brand marketing in some ways. That's an unusual opportunity in this day and age.
We kind of call ourselves a startup. Even though we're not, but I mean, and I shouldn't say there was a marketing department before. It wasn't in service of building a consumer brand. So, we do consider ourselves almost a startup within the company, because it's an amazing opportunity to kind of restart, reset, and rebuild the marketing function.
It's fascinating. One thing you mentioned that I loved is that media buyers have had to pivot a lot in the last year. I think we all need to go to Loyola and sign up for your course on media buying. I know I want to. Ethan, one other question came in before I let you go, which is someone was asking about measurement studies, and are they always on, or are they campaign based? You'd mentioned Data Plus Math a lot. Could you touch on that just real quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer from my perspective. I think there's a combination. Something like the Data Plus Math study we did was almost an always on study. Like it takes, like I mentioned, it was a 7 to 9 month undertaking, but you don't just stop after that. You're just constantly iterating it. But then there are campaign, like at Northwestern Mutual, Sprint, we had media always on. We were always running linear television. At Northwestern Mutual, we run TV, or video in like 3 specific pods of the year. We have always on digital, but so in that case, you are measuring some things that are campaign specific, but then you would have that sort of kind of overarching, closed loop attribution study running all year. I don't know, Ethan, if you have another.
I think you said it perfectly. Always on, and just because your point, there's different fighting strategies, and the market and the factors into which you're running your media are always changing, right? What might happen in your Q4 media won't necessarily hold up in your Q1 media, and so continually having that iterative process of measuring, optimizing, and measuring it again is the best success. So typically always on for Data Plus Math.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. So thank you so much, Beth. It was great insights to hear. So for folks who've joined us today, we have just one session left. We are thrilled to welcome Carol Hinnant, who is the Chief Revenue Officer at ComScore. This session is going to be moderated again by Christine, who's rejoining us from the morning. Christine Gramier is the head of our buy-side TV at LiveRamp. And we're going to welcome Carol and Christine back to the stage. Their talk today is going to focus on comprehensive cross-screen data sets and figuring out how to make sense and how to navigate the world of set-top boxes, ACR, panel data, all knit together. So help us, please make sense of this.
Thank you. I know. Thank you so much, Gayatri. I'm realizing my earpods here might run out of batteries. Might have to switch to regular, because I've been listening to all these really inspiring stories from brands already today. We talked to Bayer, we talked to Cadillac, we talked to Northwestern Mutual, and really, I get my energy from the great things that all these brands are doing. So Carol, I'm super excited to spend a few minutes with you now talking about our partnership. I introduced myself already earlier, but just so in case you didn't see that, I lead the buy-side team at LiveRamp, which means that I'm responsible to make sure we're helping brands and agencies get whatever they need. And we have a really important partnership with Carol. Carol, please introduce yourself, and then I'll go into some questions.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Carol Hinnant. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at ComScore. I oversee all of our buy-side and sell-side sales and service leads. So I'm really happy to be here. And I, too, am energized by the program today and listening to the brands. And I think our conversation should tie in very nicely with the asks that have come up on the previous panels.
Yes, I completely agree. So with that, I thought I would take a minute and just overview our partnership so you all know what we're talking about, and then we'll go right into our discussion. So if you haven't heard, hopefully you have, but LiveRamp and ComScore established a partnership going back. We initiated it about 6 months ago, and really the premise of that was to bring the incredible TV and cross-screen video assets that ComScore has together with LiveRamp identity, make sure we're really building those true, clear views of cross-screen ad exposure, and then bring them to life in the Data Plus Math platform to help brands and agencies really understand cross-screen, reach, frequency, and connection to business outcome So that is an important part of our partnership. Of course, we work with many other companies in lots of different ways, but we'll use that a little bit as a theme for our discussion today. Okay, so we're going to start by first a simple definition. We started some of the other sessions with this too. Of Carol, when someone says to you TV, how do you define it?
I always think of it first and foremost as sitting back in your living room and putting your feet up. It's the premium video content that can be enjoyed in home on a big screen.
Awesome. And that can mean that it gets there so many different ways. Earlier we heard so many different speakers sharing their challenges with the vast different number of ways that they can go about actually buying the impressions that land on that screen.
That's right. That is the challenge today. And I think that everybody's in the same boat trying to keep up because new platforms are emerging pretty much, it seems like daily, but that's been the challenge for the industry. And I think that we've heard from the brand folks earlier today that everybody's asking for the data, no more walled gardens, and they want as much as they can get so they can better understand the viewing habits.
Perfect setup, which is the challenges. Like, what are the challenges that you see in that ask today, maybe?
Yeah, I think that the way I look at it and kind of the phraseology would be transparency, right? I think that there are so many great data assets. And one of the things that ComScore has invested in heavily over the last 4 to 10 years is to acquiring those assets, bringing them in-house and aggregating them so that the individual owners of the data have a little bit more security that they do have their own data and they keep that to protect their subscriber base and their data integrity for themselves and their subscriber base. And then what we do is we aggregate that data and then make sure that we can look at it and project it out to the US so that it's not just insights from a walled garden, but insights that then can be meaningful and taken and planned, across all media. So that's really, but I look at it as like we need to have transparency and in order to make the ecosystem a little more powerful in the way it works.
Great. I think you said something earlier when we were getting prepared around potentially that sometimes we actually let perfection get in the way. In this space.
Don't let perfection get in the way of the good, or be the advocate against. I mean, I think that we need to kind of start, and that's where we have been, whether it been 10 years ago when ComScore kicked off its television measurement with set-top box data, and as we've continued to kind of cross-platform, both for ads and content, try to go through, it's like it's not a perfect system with the proliferation of platforms of where media is distributed, but we're going to have to kind of keep up and keep pace as fast as we can, bringing in all these new sources. And I think that what has happened is we've done a lot of interesting investigation into kind of smaller data sets, and then we have to say, how do we take those learnings and bring it out to kind of total measurement across the US, and that's the challenge that we have. But it's an exciting one, and we like to play in it every day.
Yeah, definitely. And you said something also in your overview there of, you said ComScore has been at it for basically 10 years.
That's right.
Maybe previously in another version of RenTrack, but this idea that this data has been around quite a while at pretty large scales, and there's been a lot of work put into it by folks, particularly ComScore, to make sure that it can be cleaned and used at scale. I think in 2005, I was sitting at a table having a conversation about the early days of making this data make sense and to be used in the way that we're using it today. It's frightening that it's 15 years later and we're actually doing it at scale, but the opportunity and the things that are really hard about this, I think they kind of need to be acknowledged and unpacked a little, because I think they can be taken for granted, and sometimes overlooked, and so quality can get in the way. I think I have four big themes in my mind when I think about the big challenges that our companies are trying to overcome together. One is identity across screens. So this idea that you might have a cable box that has a first name, last name of one of the adults in the household. I can use my home as an example. I take care of the cable bill. We are definitely not cord cutters, and my husband signs up for all the apps. So Hulu is authenticated in his name. Our cable bill is in mine, and I know it is very hard to resolve data, even in an anonymous and privacy safe way, across the screens in our home for sure. So so I think that identity across screens is a major challenge. Then one that actually Sim raised earlier this year, and I think our combined data science teams are really tackling, is the ad occurrence data for linear, and really making sure that we have a good source that can be relied upon for which linear ads run where. Post logs that are coming from the networks aren't always the fastest. They're not always the most consistent. So I think, yeah, that ad occurrence data in linear is another really important input that I know is a challenge for the industry, and we've been focused on together.
Yeah.
And then the privacy compliance, it kind of goes hand in hand with identity that I mentioned earlier, but we really want to honor the not only the requirements we have to consumers today, but also the future asks and future proofing this solution that we put together, we put in place. So I guess that's really three biggies: identity across screen, the ad occurrence data, privacy compliance. Do you have others that you add to that as big pillars when you think about these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's the quality, the content measurement, that you cannot underestimate that. Even though we do a lot of this work to empower brands and the monetization of the advertising ecosystem, none of that means anything without the quality of the content being aired. And so you also have to have an environment where the producers of this content, whether it be the traditional media, digital publishers, and even user-generated content, you have to have good means for measuring and making sure you understand how that's flowing across the various platforms. So I think that is a key component, because it's the content that people want to be associated with for the advertising. So I always want to make sure that I mention that, and it's because sometimes we can get so ad focused. But when you talk about kind of the work, I do think because I've been at ComScore, previous life for Interact for so long, that it's like, hey, data is not pretty. It is a messy environment. And when you look just at our television assets, we have over 100 patents for how to basically clean and present the data across the board. When you look at our digital data assets globally, we have, again, hundreds of patents that support our work in this data, and really kind of pioneered a way for us to present the information so that it can be used by buyers and sellers of media across the board. So I do think that that's an important thing to note, and the fact that it really has taken the dedication and work of so many people for so long to kind of bring these assets to bear in today's marketplace. And then kind of looking at that identity link, yeah, we want and we need to understand the deduplicated viewing going on. And I think we kind of hear that across the brands and earlier conversations today, is that, the marketers are looking to say, well, how many times am I reaching this person, and what environment is it the right one? So we need to provide services and tools and the proper depth of the data in order to make those studies and analyses happen and bring the information to light to put it back into the media planning and buying.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. So there's really tough, big challenges under this question of cross-screen measurement of video, but we're definitely we're definitely putting the effort in across history to get it right. So then I think maybe we could answer for the audience, really why the partnership? What were we responding to when you guys on the ComScore side jumped in? Maybe you can go first, Carol, and respond.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of best in class kind of resources to bring together and to ease the effort in the marketing, or in the market to make it easier for both of our client bases to make this information happen. I mean, definitely brands want to be able to have, outcome-based solutions. And how do we get that to pass all of the different restrictions and privacy, concerns that a lot of the data owners have? And I think that's where our joint solution kind of coming to the marketplace kind of puts brands more in the driver's seat and how they want to kind of apply some of their studies so that they can get learnings and put it back to media buying.
Very cool. So I think some of this momentum and really the brands that were asking us for this kind of a solution, they span the gamut of verticals. CPG, I'll start there. CPG, I always think of as maybe a founding vertical in early marketing mix modeling efforts and really bringing accountability to media. CPG brands are working with us, to take the understanding of what might have traditionally been a broad reach strategy of launch a new product and then drive that trial and repeat and get it moving off the store shelves. They're able to use the platform that ComScore and LiveRamp are producing together to make sure that they are reaching everybody that they want to be reaching and then measuring the sell-through of that. We heard that earlier in the session with Bayer. If you then go to financial services and you think about that category is historically has tons of data in-house. That category is really able to understand, spending some of the biggest spenders in TV, really to understand how those impressions are flowing through to driving quote starts and then ultimately through to sales. And we had automotive, we had the GM team speaking earlier today, we have QSR. So across verticals, each question becomes a little bit different, but really they were asking us for these views of cross-screen reach and frequency for their video, and then also understanding how that connects to sales. And we see I have empathy for the teams in the agencies because they are often the teams that get asked these tough questions. So the marketers turn to them and they say, what should I do with my dollars? The eyeballs are moving so quickly. And Carol, we are working with agencies closely every day. I know you are too. How do you see the agencies responding to these asks?
Well, I think that they're trying to address it very quickly. I mean, if you look at the work that they've done, I think they're leaning in, but they are challenged in that, hey, the demands might be way ahead of the solutions to provide. So planning tools, like that's where we're making an investment, trying to work with our agency partners to say, hey, this is what the brands are demanding. Let's provide these solutions. And while everybody's kind of trying to do it in this, crawl, walk, run, we're definitely in the walking and running. And I think that we have, tons of people chasing us down the road, and brands really wanting to engage even more. So I do think that I agree that from an empathy, it's like, hey, we're trying to plan, but they don't always have the full insights. Even if they have the tools at the ready, they're not getting all of the information as quickly as they need. And it is a little bit of the walled gardens or the first party data challenges or whatever. And I think that one of the things that our partnership has done is accelerate the speed at which we can deliver some of these solutions, to those who want to lean in and participate in these kind of early trials and then and learn from them and move forward. But I would say that I am pretty impressed with the speed at which we've been able to come to market. I mean, we announced a deal in May and kind of worked to align our teams and our product and the offerings. And then, we had a pretty successful Q4. And I think that we're going to take those learnings into, the upfront and beyond. So that's what I'm excited about. And I know that, my team, works very closely with yours, and we're kind of going forward with that. But I think continuing to provide the solutions and the data assets and just keep up pace with the brand's needs. That's what we need to do to push it forward. Oh, you're on mute, Christine.
I had some background noise there. I had a lawnmower outside. So I think that the point you raised there around upfronts is actually an interesting point to dig into and unpack a little more, which it came up in a couple of earlier sessions too, which is the kind of order of operations maybe shifting a little bit, at least for this year, which is that it's really hard to know, especially in the agencies, what are the rates going to be for different types of inventory? What's the availability going to be? How many people are going to be in different platforms in the coming 6 to 12 months? So as we see brands and agencies getting ready for an upfront season, that's really right around the corner. I definitely I think that there's some shifts happening of maybe we just need to measure what's going on first and not expect a perfect planning tool. Maybe we have to plan linear in one way, some addressable in another way, CTV and OTT in another way, and not expect to have a perfect magic planning tool that gives us the answer of where to put every dollar. What do you think? What are you trying to do maybe further inside of Comscore to help agencies be responsive to that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Just keeping up with the marketplace, because not only do we have multiple platforms, we have, various offerings. You have linear, data-driven linear, you have addressable. You need to, focus this across the board with the connected TV coming into play. The planners are having to look across what are the common metrics across all of these platforms. And I think that's where the audiences and impressions really help. And again, kind of the household audiences that come into place really help, because those are less transient across all of these various platforms. It's easy for our identity links and kind of that consumer purchase behavior to be tied to this. And I think that that's what's really kind of coming out. And you're right, I'm seeing that we're trying to solve what we can with the most advanced set of tools and analytics for planning, and then taking those learnings and seeing how we can improve upon them for the other various platforms that are out there.
Yep. I think nobody should feel like they're missing out on a perfect planning tool. There's a lot of really creative work that will go into this year's upfront, I'm sure.
A lot of pushing up the sleeves and working hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And not as much automation yet. So the ask that we had in the last session, which I thought was interesting, was really Beth spoke quite a bit about the partnership coming from the sell side. So she spoke about she used NBC as a couple examples, but she was really speaking broadly about lots of different sell side solutions coming to the forefront, really cross-screen strategies starting to really proliferate and starting to become part of their vocabulary. Any context you want to give us from what you're seeing or hearing from the sell side on how they might react to or how they might be packaging up what's to come for the next 12 months?
Well, I think that definitely all of our clients are definitely leaning into the audiences and impressions and see the value of kind of highlighting the unique advantages of their content and the audiences that they bring to the table. So I think that they are interested in working with the brand clients to experiment and figure out, like, how do we do this? They're also trying to figure out, like, what inventory do we put to addressable? What inventory do we do this? I mean, it's a big challenge on their side too. And especially when their audiences are moving platforms. It's not as if they're not engaged with the content. It's just, you know, that the viewership has changed, but it's still very much an NBCU audience. And so I think that it's that if you have to look at it, I always think about it as reaggregating the audience for them so it can be measured with the same metrics across. And I think that you need both sides of the buy side and the sell side being able to understand that the metric can support both sides of the equation there, and kind of give that full audience viewership, as well as the interesting insights that can come from outcome-based advertising fields.
Yeah, I love the kind of sentiment here, which is like, it's not about the eyeballs leaving TV, because sometimes I think it can be like misinterpreted that way.
Yeah, it's definitely not. Yeah.
When really it's just about it's about getting them in different ways and having to package up this, how we sell them and how we measure them differently than we're used to.
And I think that gets back to kind of the fourth topic I was talking about the content. You know, I think that the audiences that the sell side creates through their content, that's very powerful. It's a very powerful relationship that they have, and they often know more about those audiences through their own research that they do than what kind of gets presented in, hey, these are the demographics about the viewing behavior. It's like they have an intimate relationship there, and I think those understandings and learnings, when tied with the kind of the brand's desire and their CMR data, those are really where those interesting intersections of conversations can happen, and figure out together there's a path forward here. It's like maybe it's a smaller audience because we're trying to target a very specific audience, but that can be done, and it can be very successful for both sides. And I think that that's what you heard from the learnings in the earlier panels. On the financial services, that's a category, a vertical of advertisers that really invests heavily, and we need to encourage that. They do so much research, and in fact, on the ComScore side, that is a vertical where they do a lot of custom work, but we don't always see that kind of converting back into the media planning and buying, and that's one of the goals that we're trying to have. How do we take all of those interesting insights and that they're using for certain aspects of the business to kind of pull over into their media planning and buying across all platforms?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you heard the woman from Cadillac speaking earlier. She had a similar example. She shared that their most efficient CPM was in addressable TV when they really based it on the core audience that they knew were likely to buy Cadillacs. So so it really is all about the lens that you look at the question with. So this has been a great conversation so far. I had a question lined up that was coming from our team, which was, what's next in our partnership? What's coming next? And I definitely had some thoughts, but maybe Carol, I'll let you go first. But what's next on the horizon for ComScore and LiveRamp?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's limitless, because I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of the work that we're doing. But I think from a forward thinking, taking us out of just the kind of media buying and moving more into the safe haven relationship, where we can really start to do even larger work together in these clean room environments. But I think that is somewhere that the industry is really heading because of all of the privacy concerns that we talked about a little bit earlier. And so I think that is one of the solutions that we can bring to the marketplace for our client base at large, and even our prospects that are out there.
Yeah, I think that the point you just made around the future of these clean room structures, or we call safe haven for data collaboration, is intended to just enhance the collaboration between the sell side and the buy side to find things that work in their advantage, really for both of them, so that we can see some of these great insights and the information actually turn into more effective media dollars directly. And I think that the points earlier that were brought up had to do with frequency management. And I think that is sort of the next horizon here. If we can help the data be transparent about how much frequency is going to different homes at different levels, we can help publishers manage that, better on behalf of the advertisers they're serving.
I think that's absolutely right. And I actually think that for our data partners themselves, for, whether it be the MVPDs, the ACR providers, whatever, I think that the information and learnings that we're jointly providing to the marketplace empowers everybody. It's like it's going to produce better quality outcomes, and I think therefore higher CPMs across the market base. And I think that there's room for everybody, and all boats will rise when we start kind of at scale bringing out all of these solutions to the US marketplace.
And bring to life the advertisers, the brand's demands for being able to actually execute against that fluidity, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. Very good.
This was wonderful. Thank you both so much. Carol, I loved your quote that data is not pretty. Being at data companies for a lot of my career, I can absolutely agree with you on that point.
It's so funny. I'm sure that all of our wonderful data scientists, they're the smartest in the world, and they're having to break things down and explain it to me. And I was like, this is just really complicated and dirty at times, but been in it a long time. So yeah, it is not pretty, but boy, the information that comes out of it is pretty cool, and really spurs a lot of ingenuity in the marketplace.
Well, we're very excited for our partnership, which in a lot of ways does make it, I'm not sure if I'll go so far as pretty, but it does make it actionable. I think that's distinctive.
The UI is pretty nice looking. There's also some data scientists that might take offense to that. So I think we're making it prettier. There you go. It's a thing of beauty.
All right, good. Well, thank you. I love participating today. So as always, thank you. And I'm really excited to see what's next.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you, Christine, again.
Thank you, guys.
The audience, I'm going to kind of close us out today. I want to thank you so much for joining us for the Future of TV today. I know I personally took a ton from all of the sessions. I took furious notes. I thought, a little bit of a conference, I'll take a little bit of a break. No, I typed the whole time. So some of the key takeaways that I found that I'll share with you. And so we heard today from Aaron Baker at Bayer, about how to create a culture of confidence. I love that. And it's a lot of hard work and takes a great deal of discipline. We also learned from Marcy Perez from Cadillac today about their strategy that it doesn't matter where the consumers are, it matters who they are. And therefore that addressable is really been the most efficient way for them to reach their most important customers. We also learned from Beth Riley and how she's thinking about closed loop measurement as she restarts the brand marketing as sort of a startup within a very established brand of Northwestern Mutual. And then finally, Carol closes out today talking about how it is possible to knit together the alphabet soup of the data feeds. And with a reminder, which I think is always important, not to let perfection to be the enemy of progress. So some top line takeaways, I hope, and I understand that we've also taped today's session, so hopefully you can find it. Our good friends at Brand Innovators will provide details on that. Let me also remind you that about the Brand Innovators session tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern, where we have a summit on influencer marketing at our partners and friends at Influential. We'll be joined by marketing leaders from the NBA, Nestle, Benefit Cosmetics, Unilever, and many more. So a big thank you again to our colleagues here at LiveRamp, Christine, Adam, and Ethan, and at Brand Innovators, Lauren, Isabel, Vishal, Mark, and David for putting together today's excellent content. We thank everyone for your time today, and we hope to see you